This book is dedicated to His Holiness Mindrolling Trichin and my mother, Sangyam Sonam Paldron. Foreword. We all seek happiness and shun suffering, but as human beings we are distinguished from others by our intelligence. If we allow it to be controlled by negative emotions like hatred, the consequences are disastrous. But if we use it positively, we can not only recognize our predicament, but also train our minds and ways of thinking, which enables us to transform ourselves into better, happier people. The 4 reminders, explained here, form the bedrock of Buddhist practice. They are intended to encourage us to make our lives meaningful, which we can do by developing a kind heart and a sense of love, compassion, and respect for others. Khandro Rinpoche, the author of this book, is a young Tibetan woman who has had the benefit of combining religious upbringing and training with modern education, which lends a refreshing contemporary clarity to her explanation. His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. Acknowledgements. I wish to acknowledge Mindrolling Jetson Dechen Paldron for her tireless effort, generosity, and wisdom. I would also like to mention Helen Berliner, without whom this book wouldn't have been possible, Eugenia Pickett for her careful compilation and editorial input, and Dr. Carl Gross for all his hard work and patience. Editor's Preface. This book presents topics considered to be essential preliminaries to Buddhist practice and understanding. Central to this understanding, from the beginning to the end of the journey, are the 4 thoughts that transform the mind. These 4 contemplations, the preciousness of human existence, impermanence, suffering, and karma, are sometimes called the 4 reminders and are considered to be transformative in and of themselves. The first thought, the preciousness of a human life, is the unifying theme of this book. By virtue of our possessing a human birth, the cessation of suffering is possible and the gateway to liberation is open to us. Therefore, this human life is said to be precious. It is also said to be as fragile as a bubble, and this brings a sense of urgency to the path of practice, as well as a need to understand the infinitely creative ways we perpetuate suffering when in fact all sentient beings long for happiness. The book concludes with teachings on entering the gateway, a traditional metaphor to describe taking refuge in the 3 jewels of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the fruition of which is enlightenment and a genuine ability to benefit sentient beings. All of the teachings presented here examine suffering and liberation in light of our innate human wisdom and goodness. They come to us by virtue of our great good fortune in this life and through the extreme kindness and generosity of Khandro Rinpoche. A teacher dedicated to presenting the pure essence of Tibetan Buddhism, Khandro Rinpoche illuminates this profound and practical path in such a way that it actually enables one to bring one's human life to fruition. Helen Berliner. Supplication. The traditional way to begin a text is to offer supplications and prayers to all the Buddhas and bodhisattvas. It is their teachings that are being passed down to this moment through an unbroken lineage. This transmission is completely pure. By supplicating, we come to realize the tremendous responsibility we have as the containers into which the lineage is being transferred. Before receiving instructions that bring the mind to awareness, we have a valid reason to act out of ignorance. Having received such instructions, each of us is faced with a choice. We can choose to remain ignorant, or we can choose to work hard to develop something beneficial for ourselves and others. May this supplication form the basis for committing ourselves to exert effort to bring this human life and all its endowments to fruition. The 4 reminders. This human existence, with all its freedoms and endowments, is extremely difficult to attain. It enables one to accomplish the meaning of one's being. Having attained such a precious existence, if one does not accomplish benefit at this time, how could one achieve this perfect treasure in the future? The 3 realms are as impermanent as autumn clouds. The births and deaths of beings are like a dance performance. Flashing by like lightning in the sky, the lifespan of beings races swiftly like a waterfall over a steep mountain. When the time comes for even a king to depart, neither his riches nor loved ones, relatives and friends will follow. Wherever beings abide, wherever they go, Karma alone follows them like a shadow. Overpowered by existence, craving, and ignorance, all beings, humans, gods, and beings of the three lower realms, circle unwittingly in the five realms of existence like the spinning of a potter's wheel. The three realms blaze with the sufferings of old age and sickness, and there is no protector from the raging flames of death. Born into cyclic existence, beings dwell continually in ignorance, circling like bees trapped in a jar. Introduction: approaching the gateway. We take such pride in human life and think of ourselves as the most intelligent, sensible form of existence. Yet, with all of our endowments, we still cannot find happiness or peace. Unable to realize our human potential and possibilities, we allow an entire lifetime to slip away, a lifetime that could be of such tremendous benefit to ourselves and others. What is the obstacle to sharing, caring, and having loving kindness for all sentient beings? Why do fabrications or facades arise as barriers to honest human communication? And why do we live in constant extremes of hope and fear without the common sense to do something about it? We really need to think about this. In the Buddhist tradition, attaining a human life is said to occur as rarely as a blind turtle who, surfacing in a vast ocean once every 100 years, manages to put his head through a wooden yoke, floating in all directions on the surface of the water. A more contemporary analogy is the likelihood that a pea dropped from an airplane will be caught on the head of a pin held by someone on the ground. That is how rare and therefore how precious a human birth is said to be. With it, we attain a precious opportunity, the opportunity to attain enlightenment or realization in this lifetime. This opportunity is the result of aspirations made over the course of innumerable lifetimes. From a Buddhist point of view, when these aspirations mature and meet with the right conditions and teachers, it is possible for us to enter the path of practice and attain enlightenment. For such rare circumstances to come to fruition, we must understand our relationship to this path. What is enlightenment? Human beings have such an attraction to complexity. We seem to think that if it's so difficult just to earn the money for a square meal, enlightenment must be very difficult, mysterious, and complicated indeed. It doesn't occur to our common sense mind to actually see where these teachings are leading. When we enter a path of practice, we have to know where it goes. We have to enter the spiritual path with our eyes wide open. From the ultimate point of view and from the very beginning, we're talking about attaining enlightenment, which is very simply the innate nature of all sentient beings. Enlightenment is not about becoming something or someone else. It is the recognition of our intrinsic human nature, which is absolute truth. This absolute true nature is called Buddha nature. The term Buddha, from the Sanskrit tathat or tathagata, means gone beyond, going beyond an ignorant state to become completely inseparable from absolute truth, which is our genuine ground. This is the essence of Buddhism and the main focus of our understanding and practice. Enlightenment goes by many names: absolute truth, nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering, freedom from ignorance, Buddha mind, true nature of mind, fundamental ground, Tathagata-garbha, Shuddhagarbha, nature of suchness, as it is, primordial wisdom, emptiness and luminosity, bliss and emptiness, and wisdom and compassion. All of these terms refer to ultimate realization. This is the fruition that brings sentient beings from the state of ignorance to complete freedom. And this is our aspiration as we begin to practice. Never lose touch with this. When the fruition is truly understood, the ground we stand on and the path we walk on must be maintained with the same understanding. Buddha nature is the heart quality of all sentient beings. It is necessary to recognize this core essence in ourselves as well as in others. Our own basic nature is free from ignorance, grasping, and conceptual judgments. There is no room for illusion or falsity in absolute truth. Because it's inseparable from wisdom and compassion, there is no room for evil, greed, selfishness, ignorance, anger, or attachment. This intrinsic ground of goodness is undeniable. All beings appreciate qualities of goodness, wisdom, compassion, and kindness because this is our fundamental nature. Being aware of this is one thing, however. Maintaining that awareness is something else. The suffering of samsara. The first thing the Buddha taught after his enlightenment was the truth of suffering, the cause of which is ignorance. Because of ignorance, we are unable to see the compositeness of our perceptions, all the physical and mental forces that come together to create this seemingly solid world. This leads to grasping and the endless cycle of suffering called samsara. Samsara and all its suffering begin when we get caught up in solidifying external appearances instead of remaining on our fundamental ground. Contemplation. Ask yourself if it is necessary to make such great issues of the things arising from the compositeness of our senses. We can feel and understand these experiences, but none of them is solid. The moment we say happiness, for example, that moment has moved on. We may assume that this is the same happiness of a few moments ago, but other than the grasping mind that thinks it is so, nothing actually stays the same. We could spend a lifetime fixated on experiences of happiness, anger, ignorance, hatred, or jealousy. To really understand suffering, think about the magnitude and intensity of the suffering caused by grasping. There are many ways to look at suffering. We've all experienced difficulties, pain, and some amount of tragedy in our lives. We've all lost people who were very dear and close to us. Even now, some of us may be suffering from very difficult diseases or difficult times. Most of us, however, have had comfortable lives untouched by the Buddha's noble truth of suffering. We've seen very little of suffering in its entirety, which is what the suffering of all sentient beings actually means. Because we've seen so little suffering, we have no real aversion to samsara, which still seems like a very nice place to be attractive, with plenty of room in which to live and indulge ourselves. We never stop to consider that all sentient beings want happiness and freedom from suffering just as much as we do. That kind of selfishness and inability to understand our interdependence is a manifestation of ignorance, which creates samsara. If you have any attraction or devotion to the path of practice, any sense that it is really helpful and beneficial, you must ask yourself, how well do I truly understand suffering? The purpose of these teachings is to help us see the depth of suffering in the world and the cause of that suffering, which is ignorance. Ignorance is the one, if very invisible, cause of unhappiness in this world. It is the one thing that prevents simple awareness and genuine human goodness and kindness from arising without obstructions. In the form of habitual tendencies, it distracts us from our fundamental nature, which nevertheless remains constant and complete, like the luminosity of the sun. The three root poisons. A mind that cannot remain in the fundamental ground of awareness is continuously shifting and creating judgments of liking, disliking, or neutrality. This path of division is the way the mind works. Why are we so distracted? From morning to night, the body is moving, speech is moving, mind is moving, and that constant movement creates action. How many of these actions of body, speech, and mind are based on sanity, generosity, compassion, and tolerance? And how many are deeply embedded with anger, desire, or ignorance, contaminated with selfishness, laziness, jealousy, and irritation, and distracted by other inner and outer wanderings? When we realize that all of this confusion is built on a foundation of useless concepts, we begin to see why samsara is called suffering. A concept is an idea or thought that we use to elaborate on a perception. This wouldn't be a problem, of course, if all these layers of elaboration were about goodness, harmony, and peace. But in the process of elaborating, we constantly create dualities of good and bad, likes and dislikes, and further elaborations. If we like what we perceive, we grasp and elaborate with emotions arising from attachment and desire. If we dislike something, aggression will try to keep it from arising, causing fear and rejection. From liking and disliking, all the 84,000 emotions arise. A third factor, ignorance, is a sluggish state, which is sometimes referred to as neutral. This doesn't mean it's non-judgmental. Neutrality is just too lazy or distracted to judge, and so appearances drag us around wherever they like. These three basic obstacles arise in all sentient beings. They are known as the three root poisons: desire or attachment, anger or aggression, and the poison of ignorance, which constantly creates solidity and form. Having succumbed to non-awareness, we use them to solidify our concepts through elaboration. There's nothing particularly Buddhist or spiritual about seeing these three basic emotions as poisons. Not only do they not bring us any happiness, they are fully capable of destroying our sanity. And as useless as these emotions are, we constantly succumb to them. Let's say Christine is sitting in front of me. How would we elaborate on Christine? I like Christine. I don't know who Christine is. Christine is asking or answering a question. All these concepts make Christine more and more solid. In the beginning, it's just Christine, then it's a specific someone doing something specific. Christine becomes bigger and bigger and more real, and soon everyone knows about Christine. A moment ago, there was no Christine for us, and now she fills our mind, and everything is about the concept, Christine. This is how we solidify concepts through elaboration, again and again. What is Christine's true nature free from all elaborations? What is it about Christine that we could actually appreciate as it is, without layers of fabrication? When we look beyond useless judgments based on appearances, we become inseparable from the absolute truth of the fundamental ground. On this basic ground of goodness, we can establish and realize the whole Buddhist path. When the mind shifts away from that ground of awareness into interpretations based on the three root poisons, it becomes the fertile ground for the karmic seeds already sown there. Like a fertile field ready to produce plants, all the tendrils or coincidences, both auspicious and inauspicious, come together to produce their samsaric fruition, a flower in space. In essence, ignorance is nothing more than a supposition. Like something invisible, it only seems to be there. Gampopa describes ignorance in his jewel ornament of liberation as a flower in space. Imagine that you and I are sitting together, and I begin describing for you a very beautiful flower that I'm holding, which you may or may not be able to see. I go on and on about the qualities and magnificence of this flower, but the flower is imaginary, a flower in space. You might call this daydreaming. And because you can't see any flower, you find it difficult to believe in it. In the same way, ignorance is the assumption that there is a flower in space when in fact there is nothing there. Similarly, the thoughts and feelings that seem so real, my ignorance, my anger, my desires, my actual existence, are like this imaginary flower, and we can be just as obsessed by them. Certainly these emotions have a definite feeling and texture, but there is no real evidence to prove their existence. They are like flowers in space. From that perspective, we spend our entire lives enslaved by invisible thoughts and emotions with no actual existence. And another lifetime goes by, accumulating even more karmic causes that bring more fruition. This cycle of suffering is never exhausted, and we're unable to pull out of it. This is the essence of samsara. We must truly understand that suffering is caused by the ignorance of sentient beings who are unable to see their true nature. This world is definitely filled with great suffering, birth, sickness, old age, and death, as well as hatred, violence, pain, and other difficulties, but the intensity of that suffering is up to us. We are all very accustomed to making things difficult, complicated, and necessary. Grasping at such intense illusions, we allow formless thoughts to become so real that they completely overpower us and our human sensibility to just be simple human beings, honest and kind. The compositeness of perceptions. How do we create this solid environment and these circumstances we're so involved with? Everything we perceive is the result of our sixth sense. Yes, ears, nose, mouth, bodily touch, and mind consciousness working together. As the mind consciousness tries to understand and combine these forces, we begin to react to the different perceptions that arise. But ultimately, each formation comes back to a thought. For example, when consciousness arises from the mind to relate an object of sight through the sense organ of the eyes, these three create the first thought of, "Oh, I see." The same thing happens when the ear comes together with a sound and sense consciousness. A single sound can divide the mind into the three kinds of ignorance and create karma. The relationship of the six sense organs, six sense objects, and the six sense consciousnesses brings about a first thought. This is our opportunity to recognize the true nature of that perception and remain within it, or to shift into judging what we see, in which case it becomes something we like, dislike, or want to ignore, and endless concepts are created. As long as we are not dead, our bodies and minds, with their sense organs, sense objects, and sense consciousnesses, are constantly moving, which produces the constant perception of activity. Recognizing this, we begin to understand the root cause of the endless churning of emotions and pain. It is only through understanding the compositeness of relative reality that the inner essence, which we call absolute, can be truly understood. From the Buddhist perspective, everything arises from mind, all our perceptions and feelings, as well as the external environment and our relationship to it. Every imaginable difficulty or emotion, happiness, suffering, anger, ignorance, desire, attachment, jealousy, hatred, is nothing but an assumption of mind. From this perspective, everything we try to hold on to is a dream. Our good life, bad life, happy or sad life, complicated or simple life, spiritual or samsaric life is just a dream that we spend our lives elaborating. As we move from one perception to the next, grasping makes things solid, solidity brings judgment, and judgment keeps us busy. Grasping, judging, and solidifying appearances is unnecessary entertainment that never allows us to recognize their true nature. Grasping at a self creates aggression. Grasping at other creates attachment, and the more we hold on, the more real they become. We might find ourselves saying, "I'm so angry. How depressing that nobody appreciates how huge my anger is, how badly it needs to be analyzed, demonstrated, and given a history, and someone to blame." But what good is all this concreteness we're holding on to, other than our assumption that it protects our ego? We might hold on to anger for an entire lifetime, which doesn't harm anyone but ourselves. Only we experience the real difficulties and disappointments of such a life. Life goes on, and no one is any the worse for our anger. The sun continues to shine, the earth and moon continue to revolve, and the sky is still there. So whose loss is it? In a moment of true necessity such as death, it's just another thought labeled anger, no different from any other thought, and of no benefit to ourselves or anyone else. From this point of view, we might look at our anger and see that it's only somewhat real. We might actually be able to talk and laugh about it. Looking at the empty nature of all phenomena is like peeling away the trunk of a banana tree. The big trunk of a banana tree looks very solid, but it's just a formation of leaves, one over the other. Peel away all the layers of leaves, and there's no tree trunk left. A meditator is able to see samsara in the same way. In essence, none of the appearances and experiences we work with has a complicated nature or solid form. Like the banana tree, they're illusions. It's a question of how seriously we take them. How seriously do we take this moment, and how is this any different from a dream? Everything arises from within ourselves, like the dreams we dream when we sleep at night. You might experience great fear, for example, if you dream of a ferocious animal coming to eat you up. When you wake up, you see that it is only a dream. No matter what good or bad experiences we have in our dreams, when we wake up, we see they were never there. Discovering our true nature. Discovering our absolute true nature is the essence of the practice of Buddhism, which is a non-theistic philosophy. Buddhism is not about saving ourselves or others. It's not about letting go of this or that, or achieving this or that. All of these polarities or extremes that begin with an action and end with a result are merely supports for absolute truth. This might seem like a contradiction. How can absolute truth beyond concepts rely on a subject and object, or on theistic notions such as a shrine, sacredness, or a path? Why, instead of just getting down to the core essence, do we talk about 6 realms with even further categories and details? Why do we now have even more forms and divisions than we had before? The purpose of all the different forms of teaching and learning, practices, sadhanas, rituals, and so on, is to provide a path to the realization of inner essence, which is absolute truth. To work with a mind that continuously makes logical excuses and hides behind habitual concepts, we have all the different colors and forms, such as shrines and teachers, vows, precepts, and other disciplines and philosophies. When we sit in the shrine room, which we call a sacred place, facing representations of the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and teachers, or directly in front of a teacher, we're building in certain restrictions. We create these forms and environments in the hope that, at least in the moment, we can be more honest and have more determination and openness than we do in our daily life with its chaos, confusion, and habitual patterns. In this way, one step at a time, we can develop the real courage of mind to do things differently. This is how we move toward enlightenment. Enlightenment is recognizing the true nature of every appearance, sound, sight, smell, form, taste, touch, thought, or feeling that arises. It is recognizing that this display of perceptions is an illusion. It is empty in the sense that nothing is solid. We can view every experience, everything we do, relate to, or try to make sense of as a dream. The Buddhist path is simply a way of working with these dreams. There is nothing mysterious about working with the dreamlike or empty nature of things. Working with relative reality. When we talk about the illusory nature of things, we are not criticizing the relative reality of our perceptions, and we're not trying to stop liking all the things that we see, hear, and so on. We are trying to see their compositeness and not make them more real than necessary. Buddhist practice is a way to understand that. When we walk out the door after meditation, all our perceptions and emotions will seem real. From them, we create our worlds, your world, my world, and from that comes selfishness, ego grasping, and all the complexity of conditioned existence. Buddhist practice is a way to understand that as long as our sense perceptions function, we can work with the notion that they are not all that real. We are not trying to destroy what is there. We're trying to develop an openness of mind. An open mind is not so worried about things. There is less worriedness about making things more real than necessary, and less worriedness about needing to make them unreal. Otherwise, we could spend a lifetime trying to renounce attachment to our world, which is one path of practice, and sometimes it's helpful. As monastics, we might renounce family, property, land, and money and make lists of the things that we're attached to. But a simpler way to get to the root of things is to simply work with our minds. If we could recognize the empty nature of just one thought, we would understand the inherent emptiness of all thoughts. It's not necessary to work through the solidity of every concept to reach the state of exhaustion. We don't have to exhaust all ignorance, attachment, desire, ignorance, hatred, and jealousy. We need only recognize that the nature of mind is inherently and truly free from grasping. This alone brings freedom from illusions. Anything else provides fertile ground for the production of karma. When mind shifts from awareness to non-awareness, limitless karmic seeds grow in that ground and come to fruition, and the cycle of suffering continues. These instructions are being given to you. As Buddhist practitioners, we're following the example of Shakyamuni Buddha. When the Buddha first attained enlightenment, the first thing he taught was the nature of absolute truth, the fundamental true nature of mind. But no one understood him. The Buddha then taught the first noble truth of suffering. Now, you might think that just because that ignorant group didn't get it 2,500 years ago, we have to deal with all these rituals and listen to 84,000 tenet teachings and commentaries and so on. These instructions, however, are being given to you. If Shakyamuni Buddha were sitting in front of you present into the absolute true nature of mind, would you be able to understand it and put it into practice, even today, with all your potential and access to Buddhist teachings? And if I were to tell you that, because the nature of mind is emptiness and luminosity, all you need to do is let go of all grasping. That's all that Buddhism is about. Could you do it? There's a difference between understanding this view and being able to hold it and put it into practice. For this, we must transcend habitual patterns of body, speech, and mind. The challenge of habitual patterns. Although intrinsic basic goodness is within all of us, we still come face to face with tremendous challenges known as habitual patterns. Our enthusiasm and awareness may be challenged by emotional afflictions such as ignorance, desire, hatred, jealousy, or anger. More often than not, we succumb to these distractions. Most of us are so preoccupied with our habitual patterns that we've lost the simplicity of absolute truth, which is no longer reflected in the actions of our body, speech, and mind. Failing to maintain our awareness of fundamental truth, we come to depend on the falsity of appearances or false views. We then base all our judgments on what is apparent rather than true. If anger arises, for example, rather than looking into the depth of another person's heart, we judge the sounds and actions we perceive, which gives rise to endless elaborations. We are then unable to realize our genuine nature. We could say that ultimately enlightenment is the exhaustion of all such concepts. Habitual patterns provide us with a ground of familiarity. It's the familiar way we've lived this life and innumerable other lives, the familiar way we solidify every feeling, perception, thought, and action. It's the familiar way we make things real, elaborating, judging, and expanding, and then cater to that reality and try to survive in it. We may not like our anger, for example, but if anger is our habitual ground, it's more familiar than tolerance. And in spite of our aspirations, we're unable to let go of anger and turn to tolerance. We are constantly faced with the challenge of breaking through what have become very set patterns of thinking, speaking, and living. You don't need to begin by changing the world. Much has already been written about spiritual practice. Everyone understands spiritual materialism and agrees that it is the quality, not the quantity, of practice that's important. And in spite of all the practices and philosophies, we do understand that it's the mind that needs to be trained, and that if we are on the path of meditation, we do need to develop compassion and kindness. But we don't need to begin by changing the world or transforming all ignorance into wisdom. First of all, when we enter the profound path and practice of meditation, compassion towards sentient beings is a given. Their benefit is inherent in our meditation and practice. Before we think about generating compassion for the suffering and ignorance of all beings, we must first learn to see through our own illusions. Seeing our experience as illusion is not a way of destroying relative reality. It's a way of working with its absolute essence, which is our own true nature. Otherwise, we end up creating endless complexities and spend lifetimes trying to make things solid when they're not. From this seeming solidity arises the constant flickering of mine and yours, and other emotions such as searching, wanting, and anxiety. Above all, there's the intensity of ignorance, wanting happiness. We're unable to create the cause of happiness. Wanting to walk in one direction, we walk the opposite way, hoping against hope that something will change. How many of us end up doing this very thing, taking control of your life? Because ignorance doesn't allow our human sensibilities to develop or express themselves fully or properly, it creates a prison-like situation. In this conditioned world of samsara, why can we not express our real truth and potential completely? It's because we're unable to control our bodies, our speech, or our minds. Understanding this, we begin to see what the suffering of samsara is really about. Since you have this precious human life, you must have some control over it. If you decide, for example, that you'd really like not to harm others physically, it should be possible not to do so. There should be no obstacle to physically expressing flexibility and kindness, and there should be no real obstacle to kindness arising in your speech. You should be able to use your speech properly, with discipline, in a way that truly benefits others. And if you're generating thoughts in your mind, you need to have some control over your mind. Having control over your body, speech, and mind is like being a skillful rider. You can go where you want to go. The horse goes in the direction that you want to go in. An unskilled rider, trying to ride a wild horse, eventually ends up wherever the horse wants to go. In the same way, you may find your body going in one direction, your speech in another, and the rest of your sensibilities not waking up until quite a bit later, if then. The whole framework of the Buddhist path, The various levels and practices and forms for sitting, standing, thinking, and behaving is a support for learning to work with our mental concepts and developing the ability to maintain awareness. And from a Buddhist point of view, training the mind through meditation is essential. Training the mind through meditation. The path of meditation works with the root, which is mind. Chas-ing after everything else will keep you busy, but no real inner change or transformation will arise from your spiritual practice. It's like the popular game show I saw on German TV. Lots of colorful balls keep popping up from a hole, and players with sticks in their hands try to hit the balls as soon as they arise. The more balls you hit, the more points you win. Our meditation is sometimes like that. We sit and wait for our so-called obstacles attachment, desire, hatred, jealousy to pop up. Then, holding our spiritual philosophies in our hands, we try to hit them as soon as they arise. This keeps us very busy, and we have a sense of getting things done. But other than boosting our ego, we cannot really say we're meditating, nor will this bring the freedom from ignorance that we seek. Creating a spiritual illusion is no better than creating any other illusion. The main point of meditation practice, the essence of Dharma itself, is to be completely honest and to work with that honesty in a simple way. To understand the practice of meditation is to understand simplicity. The basic foundation of the teachings lies in how very simple and ordinary, and yet how profound things can be. No meditator can afford to get caught up in things that aren't all that necessary. We really need to understand this. Instead of creating great seriousness and grave issues, we need to lighten up and open ourselves up to our true nature. Meditation enables us to see the seed of enlightenment in every emotion or thought, so that any concept can bring awareness of our fundamental ground. When the mind rests in awareness, there is no ground for the creation of karma, and nothing causes the mind to shift into unawareness or solidify concepts. The ground and path of our practice are completely based on the exhaustion of ignorance and false views. Any trace of conceptualizing the ground or path is a gap between our path and fruition. If the aim of our meditation is to exhaust all concepts, then the view and path must be free from concepts as well. Maintaining a conceptual attitude in meditation won't lead to a non-conceptual state, will it? If we want sweet fruit, we have to plant a sweet seed. Or, as Tibetans say, if you want to go north, you have to walk north. You can't get to the north by walking south. Of course, this example is completely outdated, since we all know the world is round. Nevertheless, if we want freedom from samsara, we need to go in that direction. From a Buddhist perspective, enlightenment is freedom from concepts and elaboration. To see the emptiness of concepts and elaboration is why we meditate. Crossing over. The four thoughts that transform the mind. The path of practice leads us out of ignorance and grasping and brings us to the state called nirvana, or enlightenment. This is referred to as crossing over to realize absolute truth, which completely removes every stain of ignorance that obscures the mind. In this way, the true nature of things can be understood. One of the best supports for this path is the contemplation of the four thoughts that transform the mind. Contemplation is another simple antidote for the solid concepts we're so attached to. Using the theory like cures like, we can use a concept to cure a concept. We can use a positive thought to transform a negative thought. By transforming negative concepts into positive concepts, we enter into a deeper understanding of the true essence or meaning. This is what the Hinayana and Mahayana practice paths are about. Mind then becomes mature enough to understand transcendence, which is what the Vajrayana teachings are about. First, contemplating the preciousness of human existence brings a genuine appreciation of our human body, mind, and potential. With exertion, we can actually create the cause for genuine happiness and benefit for others. Contemplating impermanence brings a sense of urgency about not wasting that potential and exerting more effort. Contemplating the suffering of the six realms enables us not to conceptualize selflessness and exertion. Whether we read about it or actually experience it, the pain of sentient beings should turn our minds toward exertion and effort. In that way, we become free from the ignorance that creates confusion and unnecessary suffering. Contemplating both impermanence and suffering brings a strong motivation to create the fundamental ground of good karma. With a ground of good, positive actions, we can attain happiness and the cause of happiness for ourselves and others. Otherwise, there would be no reason to contemplate such things. Contemplating karma develops awareness and helps us to understand the intricacies of a mind that continually slips back into habitual patterns. We may aspire to selflessness and freedom from habitual conceptualizing, but just talking about them is not enough if we lack the awareness to put these things into practice. Contemplating karma, we realize the need for the support of constant mindfulness and awareness. We also understand the importance of aspiring to compassion and freedom from suffering for all sentient beings. If our compassion is truly genuine, there won't be any lack of awareness. If there is a lack of awareness, we need to strengthen our aspiration and put it into action. Contemplating karma challenges us to see whether awareness has been truly planted and strengthened in our mind as a result of contemplating the other three reminders. Seeing the diversity of suffering that karma creates, we want all sentient beings to be free from suffering. It's not just about us saving ourselves or escaping from samsara. It's about the exertion we put into bringing all of our human endowments to fruition. The teachings on suffering and karma are not meant to lead to paralyzing fear or a solidification of the realms and their sufferings. Instead, they enable us to create positive circumstances from adverse circumstances. Because our effort is non-conceptual, we can put that effort into the right path, the path of genuine compassion. Compassion arises for all sentient beings who, through a single moment of ignorance, are stuck in painful creations that they don't want but continue to create. Contemplating the four reminders and bringing them to the path brings an understanding of the path and the practices. Otherwise, if we're simply dabbling in Buddhism, we might get stuck at those points that we like or dislike, conceptualizing them and making them solid. Then history would repeat itself. Mind would come up with very spiritual reasons that it shouldn't let go of grasping. We would revert to habitual actions, and our aspiration to benefit beings would never be accomplished. This contemplation doesn't need to be sequential or even particularly Buddhist. The four reminders bring the mind back again and again to the ground of awareness, which becomes stronger. When habitual patterns strike, awareness is there, and we can go on our way, maintaining even greater awareness. We will contemplate the four reminders in the following chapters, beginning with the preciousness of human existence.